Good morning. How are you doing?
Doing very well. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks. Guess it's
Thanks
not
for
too early
having
for you
us.
guys.
No, it's a little early for Danielle probably, but it's about 9 o'clock for me.
Oh, okay. And what part of the country are you in, Daniel?
Oh, just a little to the west, just an hour earlier than Alex.
Oh, okay. So it's about 8 o'clock at your place.
And you're just wrapping up your Thursday, right?
No, it's Friday. We are wrapping up Friday. We are 9.5 hours ahead of you.
Okay.
All right.
Well, thanks for your flexibility.
Yeah. Maybe let's wait for a couple of minutes for people to join in, and then we get started. Alex, can you try and unmute yourself?
It's working for me now.
There we go.
All right, cool. First, introduce and give you a brief about what Coffee Chat with FiveS is all about. And then let's hit the agenda straight away. Unfortunately, Debbie couldn't join us today because of exigencies in her family. Having said that, we keep talking a lot about some amazing work that you have been doing at Google, Alex, particularly with regard to impact sourcing. And off late, Daniel, when you have joined in with regard to diversity and inclusivity, some phenomenal work happening there as well. So Coffee Chat is a monthly, virtual chat event, which, we organize at FiveS. We are an impact sourcing organization into business for almost about 12 years. Recently being certified, and I take extreme, pride in saying this. Recently being certified by WeConnect as a largely woman-owned organization, and the organization consists of close to about 42 to 43% women, differently able people coming from all walks of life, operating largely in Indian subcontinent. And one of the very interesting facts that we actually implemented by being part of Global Impact Sourcing Coalition, along with Sarah and team at BSR, we actually implemented impact sourcing standard, and we had our last data that came out about a few weeks back, wherein we were able to uplift 25% of our impact sourcing impact workers to come above the poverty line. And in fact, with our focus on customer experience, digital transformation, and focused on AI, machine learning, data training verticals, we are enabling people in various parts of India to be digitally literate and help their families and community to be better and self-reliant. So I think I would take a pause here, and it would be great, Alex and Danielle, in sequence, if you can introduce yourself to the audience, and then we can take it up from there.
Great. You want to go ahead, Danielle?
Sure.
Hi.
Sure, I can go ahead and start. Thank you, Kapil and FiveS, for hosting this, and for all the attendees getting up bright and early or staying up late to join the discussion. Really excited to be here. I have a background. My career actually got started in racial justice advocacy with a nonprofit called the Greenlighting Institute, working on workforce and supplier diversity advocacy. And I've been very vocal about this at Google, so I guess I can spill the beans here again. I am by nature not passionate about procurement. It doesn't, or outsourcing. It's not something that gives me the warms and fuzzies. I think like it does in Alex in the same regard. But something that I am passionate about is racial justice and closing the racial wealth gap. That keeps me up at night. And I knew by working in those channels that it's an excellent way to diversify and gain access to great paying jobs that have the transformational power to increase the betterment, not just for individuals, but their entire families, and change the trajectory of communities. And so went to grad school and had the opportunity to learn about impact sourcing, and the opportunity here at Google to stand up a program within our specific procurement organization. And the idea of being able to leverage an economic footprint so large as Google and thinking about that impact all over the world and the tools and the metrics of impact sourcing are complementary, but very granular and exciting in comparison to supplier diversity. That felt like a new frontier for me. And so it's been fabulous to connect with folks like Alex that have been really established and doing a lot of great work around Google, stand on their shoulders and think about how can we embed these systems and these kind of programming on a centralized front as Google thinks about how we tie together all of our procurement across the enterprise. So I'll pass it to Alex.
Thank you so much. Well, my name is Alex Rochlitz, and I have unfortunately or fortunately been in outsourcing my whole career. I wouldn't say that, it gives me the warm and fuzzies, but it's something that I know very well. I've spent my whole career since I was right out of college doing outsourcing advisory. I was a consultant before I came to Google for about 7 years. I did the whole, road warrior routine. I was, out at different clients pretty much every week. And that was a immersion, to say the least, in outsourcing. I worked with, a lot of really experienced people who, came from the old school IBM, EDS days. So, I have a lot of context and history on outsourcing. When I came to Google about 4 years ago, that was the first time I'd ever heard impact sourcing used in a sentence, which I was shocked by because I had been so immersed in outsourcing for my whole career. It was not something that was talked about. It was not a priority for most companies. And, I've learned why that is. So over the years, most outsourcing is done in struggling industries with firms that have made commitments to cut costs, and it can be a very ruthless endeavor. People lose their jobs, and that's a lot of the work that I did was offshoring internal operations, and I was proud of that work, and definitely did a lot of good things, but I certainly never felt like I was contributing a whole lot on a societal basis. It was all about saving money, improving operations. So when I got an opportunity to start working on the impact sourcing program at Google, it was really, sorry, did I lose everyone? Can anyone hear me? You still there? Okay, good. Again, it was brand new to me. I had zero idea of what it was and how we were going to make it work. We had already started some small pilots with a couple of our big BPO providers, but it was definitely total walking in the dark, trying to figure out what works, trying to figure out what impact sourcing was, trying to teach other people at Google what impact sourcing was, which is sometimes difficult. And over the years, I spent a lot of time speaking with people who have more experience, other companies that have been super successful, and I won't claim any major success in terms of what we've done at Google. I'm proud of the work that we've done. We've at times employed hundreds of impact workers across my product area and in the organization that I'm a part of. But you look at companies like Microsoft and Intuit and Sutherland and FiveS and some of the pure impact providers that have done so much good and been so successful. It's truly both an inspiration and a constant anxiety for me to live up to our potential, because we still have a lot of room to improve and a lot of growth to get to where we want to be, and that's one of the reasons why this year I think is going to be big for us, not just because we have Danielle who's joined us and who brings so much experience and passion to the cause and to DEI in general, but the opportunities for impact sourcing post-COVID, now that things are starting to settle down, are tremendous. And the biases that buyer companies, that provider companies have had for decades are all coming crashing down. We don't need a person to sit in a chair in our office and have someone looking over their shoulder while they do their work. Most of our outsourcing workflows can be done anywhere, by anyone. And that's really the message of impact sourcing that I think is most important and resonates with me. It's the number counting and the head count calculations and all that stuff that's important to share the success stories and justify our investment in the programs is important. But to me, it's all about that philosophical mindset change of do we need someone with a 4-year college degree in order to do this? No, we don't. Do we need to hire and recruit and award business to the same groups of vendors that have been doing the same type of hiring and recruiting? We do not need to do that. So I think that's really the big picture, and not just for outsourcing providers, but for every business, because we could be doing the same things, and we are in many cases. Expanding our mind and going a little bit further than maybe what's easiest in order to support people, and give them these opportunities. So that's why I love impact sourcing and why I keep coming back to it. I can't, get away from it, because I've got this nagging thing in the back of my mind that we've got to make it work. It's too important to not, be successful. So that's what kind of keeps me up at night and gets me excited about, working on this stuff during the day.
That's really amazing to know, right? So now it's like, power of two at Google. Alex being passionate about impact sourcing, and Daniel having done a lot of work. I was actually going through your profile about the work that you have done in, bringing in equality and diversity and inclusion, for that matter, at work. I think it's phenomenal. What I'm very keen to understand from both of you, and you guys can decide to pick up, if you can give a brief about impact sourcing and responsible sourcing initiatives that you guys have, set up at Google, and what are the goals and targets in sight that you have for next 12, 18 months or 24 months?
Let me take the kind of past experience. So definitely when we started off, we were targeting growing impact sourcing with our existing providers, and those were, the big BPOs of the world. And through a lot of trial and error, we had some success. We had some partnerships that we, joint subcontractor type engagement models with a company called People Shores, which is local in San Jose. We also had some success with vendors kind of doing this organically that didn't have very much experience. But in the end, that was hard for providers that didn't have this kind of ingrained in their business model. It took a couple of years, I would say, for our big providers to catch up and understand what it actually meant to do impact sourcing. For instance, their gut reaction is, let's just flip a couple switches in our recruiting and candidate platforms to catch the impact workers that we've already got out there, and just kind of keep doing things normal course of business, which is it's great. There are plenty of good things that companies are doing already, but what we learned over time is outside of working directly with a pure impact provider like FiveS, the big companies have to take a very targeted, very intentional, programmatic approach to running impact sourcing programs. And after some trial and error, we have a great case study from Cognizant, one of our big partners, who finally understood that this was a very people-centric approach. They were going to look at a very specific workflow. They were going to target a very specific group of people that they were looking to support and hire. They were going to get approval from us to modify, so for instance, they were doing a workflow that involved data annotation and some content review, and they wanted to be able to have people that were deaf do the same workflow. They needed some special equipment. They needed some change to the process, and that doesn't happen overnight. There's work that needs to go into that. There's approvals on our side that need to happen. But they realized that what we were looking for is fully scoped out, de-risked solution, and they did the work to make sure that that was not going to impact operations, that these people were going to be successful and supported and have what they needed in order to do their jobs. Rigor that we were looking for when it comes to actually executing on some of these new opportunities. So I'd say that that's kind of the success stories we have been kind of the transition and more kind of mature approach to how our vendors actually spin up this work and how we can support them throughout that process. And it comes down to, at the end, a very targeted campaign, not just pulling in individuals, into a larger workflow, but a very specific, operation where we're helping a very specific group of people. And that seems to be what was successful with us. And it's definitely our goal to expand that and to work more closely with, pure impact providers. And I think that that's one of the focus areas that we've got for this year, but I'll let Danielle speak a little bit more about, kind of what our plans and goals are, for 2022.
Sure. I think Alex did a great job of recapping, and I really want to underscore that the work that has been done so far is suppliers themselves really taking this initiative and like FiveS and others that are supporting individual impact workers, and that Google, because our net of suppliers is quite frankly so large, have happened, and because impact sourcing and workers do quality work, as we all know, had just happened a lot of times to have them in our supplier stable. The intentional impact sourcing work that has happened so far has just been, I think, to my understanding, I've been at Google here for a little less than 6 months, has been individual hustlers like Alex in our various departments, which are still, by comparison to a lot of businesses out there, quite large. But when it comes to Google, centrally having our own impact sourcing program, which is what I'm trying to do right now, being brought on by, it's such a big behemoth that I think we're going to have to do a lot of custom data creation and trying to figure out what our own internal systems might have to be built out to create a comprehensive strategy, which we're very excited to do now that we have the bandwidth and resources. And procurement, I think, is having a moment in time on a social level that it really is a driver for reducing inequality, in addition to all of the great bottom line return on investment that it has. And so excited to kind of build off of the proven cases, the individual cases that have been happening in our individual departments, so to speak, and then bring that together from a central place where Google procurement sits right now. It's just such a big monster, to get your arms around it. We're not trying to reinvent the wheel by any means. And so I think it's wonderful to have a platform like this to really posture ourselves as eager learners and not trying to reinvent the wheel. I know Alex has done a lot of work with the IAOP, which I know Debbie represents and does a fantastic job as their CEO, former member of the Global Impact Sourcing Consortium, to learn from others, especially impact sourcing service providers that are on the ground and community members, because as a top-down organization, I think there are so many ways that we could get this wrong, frankly. And so to learn from folks that are maybe closer to communities, learn those best practices, start on the individual department level, and then kind of back up into our overall strategy level on an enterprise level, I think is slow and frustrating, as Alex mentioned in his opening statements. And I'm confident that it will lead us into a successful 2022 where we can have that more comprehensive strategy development and then really start to feel the impact of our wide economic footprint.
Awesome. I think that's really amazing, and I'm so glad, happy, excited all together to hear from horse's mouth, because it has been talked widely that buyers usually do not have this perspective that impact sourcing can work or would work or not work. But hearing from you, makes me feel pretty positive about this. It then brings me to the next aspect of being a buyer. And if I have to look at your perspective, what are your success matrices that you look at? Alex, you have been into outsourcing all your life. So do you think that there is a misconception, or there is some iota of truth in this, that if you do impact sourcing, you are actually impacting your business matrices? Just give a brief on what is your measurement matrices on, particularly with regard to any engagement to be successful from a buyer perspective. And if you can possibly give an example of a great case study, I think that would help everyone a lot.
Sure. So there's no doubt that impact sourcing on both ends, buyer and provider side, is not a free lunch. There's work, primarily time and effort, that needs to be done in order to do it correctly. Because the last thing that we want to do is put impact sourcing into our ecosystem and have it fail. You touched on it a little bit. People do believe that impact sourcing can be done. They want to do it. No one doesn't want to be involved in it because the success stories and the opportunities are so great. But it's reasonable to see the perspective of an executive who's got a huge business to run. They are not keen on taking risks. They are not always keen on working with very small niche providers. So doing that work up front to ensure success and guarantee success, in fact, and that does involve picking the right providers, and that's been the biggest heartache for me by far, working in impact sourcing at Google, is that I can't hire every single firm that comes along. I want to, and I think we're striving to get to a place where we have more of a marketplace ecosystem within our outsourcing portfolio, where we can plug people in very easily and give them the support they need to do whatever tasks or activities are involved in that piece of work. But nonetheless, one of the big learnings I had is not putting the cart before the horse, selling the story to our executives before we kind of jump in with 2 feet, because they need to have that confidence that this is going to be a success. I think from a traditional procurement perspective, there are some aspects of impact sourcing that kind of go against the grain of what we would strive to do. For instance, consolidating vendors. We want to work with as little amount of vendors as we possibly can because it's easier to manage. Generally, that provides more scale and cost savings, and a vendor's ability to optimize, share knowledge and get up to speed quickly when they have new work that comes to them. These are all vendor management and procurement standards, if you will, and bringing in a small provider to do a small piece of a much bigger workflow creates a lot of challenges. So there's a couple ways that we have approached this problem. First of all, being creating the space and the resources for us to manage these smaller operations. That's an investment on our part, and in most cases it's something that we're willing to do. But again, it takes building a business case and going to leadership and saying, hey, I would love if one of your vendor managers had 50% of their bandwidth to manage this operation and help to nurture and grow it. That's one approach. The thing that I'm very excited and optimistic about in the future, and something that we've talked a lot about with Debbie and IAOP, is creating more opportunities for partnerships within the provider community. One thing that I wasn't very, after some time and understanding, when we were writing the impact sourcing standard and the buyer's guide with the GISC, what I came to realize was that the focus and the onus was largely on buyers to make this happen. And that's understandable because we control the money, we can influence our vendors to a large degree, but we can't influence them more than they can influence themselves. And no one needs to be told to do impact sourcing by their client. In most cases, vendors can hire whoever they want. They can do whatever they want. The operations are governed by service levels and pricing methodology. And as long as those two things remain positive and green, I could care less. If you're hiring people on the moon, if you're automating half the work, as long as the outcomes are the same, doesn't matter. From the buyer's perspective, we want to purchase services. And so there's a massive opportunity, through outsourcing. Millions and millions of people are employed all around the world, in most of the places where people need help the most, where there are the biggest opportunities to lift individuals out of poverty and to affect communities in an exponential way. While I'll say impact sourcing can be done anywhere with anyone and it's all good, there's certainly a degree of, where the impact is most impactful and effective. Kind of to summarize that last point, I am hoping that companies like FiveS, like, Rural Shores, like B2R, I get it. It's very hard to sell to a company like Google. When you are a small firm, again, it's not the norm for how this stuff works. But what the big providers are lacking, the impact providers have, and vice versa. They can sell, you can do the impact work in a much more meaningful way. You understand how to support people, you understand where to go to find the people that need the most help. Most of the big, outsourcing providers are far behind from that regard. So there's a huge opportunity to partner together, deliver services together. It's been done for years, for decades. Subcontracting is a very common practice. And that could be a temporary thing to help someone get spun up. In my experience, if I ask a big provider to do something for me, like support a small vendor, like invest some time to help with training, they're going to do it, not just because I'm their client and I've asked them to, but because they see the value in this. They want to be involved in this. And at the end of the day, what Danielle is aiming to create is the incentives and rewards at the end of the day, which are very important. We don't have any misgivings that provider companies, whether they're big or small, they want to grow their business, and that's a fact of life. So we want to try to reward companies that are high performers and that are also very successful in this space. And it's our goal to make that a criteria for our big preferred suppliers, and a solution requirement for new business and RFP opportunities. These are the things that we can do to create that kind of organic process and with pulling rather than pushing. Another big lesson that I learned is the stick does not work as well as the carrot when it comes to this stuff. And if a vendor is not fully into this and invested in it, it's not going to work. They have to do it right. And that's, in the Cognizant example, a great example of how that switch turned on for them. They did not get it at first. They were trying to force feed metrics into their recruiting pipeline. They understood, finally, we need to spend the time, have a dedicated program manager to get this started. That's what ends up working in the end. And that's what we're looking for, to build the infrastructure at our company to have this happen on its own without us having to kind of, do heavy lifting and get things off the ground.
I think that's really amazing. In fact, it actually reminds me of one very interesting story that we keep talking about at FiveS. We actually still have her. Her name is Vaishali. So Vaishali, has been working with us for more than 10 years now. When she started working with us, she was actually acting as a pin removal agent for scanning the documents. Okay, and even today she cannot, talk in English. But today she processed documents for our one of the biggest clients in European market, and she processes documents in French and Deutsch, right? And if I have to go and ask her, can you read it? She just cannot. So having said that, each document or transaction that she processes, and it's like thousands of euros, right? You're talking about accounts payable. And, there are many stories like her where, people do it right. So what we realized essentially over a period of time is, there are two things. One, whether you create a model around your business or you create your business around this model, right? For us at FiveS and many others like B2R, you talked about rural shores. In fact, very glad to hear that People Shores just started about a couple of years in the Bay Area, and, now doing some phenomenal stuff out there. I think if you have got a business that works with such a model, I think it's all about the stories that you create and the experience, that actually the client's customers would have without compromising on any of the key business matrices. Very well, explained, Alex. Daniel, do you want to add anything to this?
That's a big challenge. No, I think Alex did a great job. I'll leave perfection as it is.
Oh, great. So, no, absolutely. I think this really talks about the passion that you come with, particularly with regard to impact sourcing. I would just want to, touch base upon your core business focus, Alex. You have been focused on customer experience or CX strategy largely. How does that fit into Google, and what's exactly your goal when you look at building an experience strategy for your customers, be it a data program or be it a customer service vertical? Just talk a bit about the strategy piece in terms of how do you come about it, and what are the ways to think around building a great customer centric organization that you have been focused on building.
Well, that's a tough question, and I won't claim to be a customer service expert. I have supported probably our biggest customer support operation in Google, which is our consumer user and products area. So it's a massive operation, and we support billions of customers around the world. And spending a lot of time in that space over the past 2 or 3 years, what I can say is that the strategy is evolving. It's very secular at times. We gravitate from, being more metrics and I guess standoff and more, management focused to having more targeted training and support for agents and trying to up level them. A lot of things that we've talked about over the past year, is focusing on the product life cycle. And you can imagine, even just within my portfolio, there's a couple dozen products. Just Play in itself has a dozen or more, Pixel and all of our devices. It's difficult to get the scale and efficiency that you want to see from kind of an operational and procurement perspective, while also driving, CSAT and customer experience and supporting our brands. We've done a lot of work with like our smart journey, trying to automate a lot of things and to make sure that customers are getting to the right person in the quickest way possible. Like when you look at our queues, the transfer rate and the consult rate, because people are, is this my Pixel's fault or is it the Play Store's fault? Is it, it's difficult for a company like us to get that right because we have so many products and we have so many different customers all around the world. So we've definitely had, iterations of like this universal agent concept, for instance, where, one individual is able to support a wide range of products. When you go down that, you lose a lot of the, intimate product knowledge and details that a specialist can bring to the table. So I'd say we're always trying to find the middle ground there and kind of the optimal point where we can provide good, fast service to customers, but also do that efficiently and effectively, with our huge footprint. And I hope that answers your question because, again, the answer to this is different depending on the type of work that we're doing. And I think where it becomes very relevant to impact sourcing is there are some operations that we have, especially like if you look at the AdWords and digital advertising side of our business that we've outsourced, tenure and experience is critical there. And there are some, blurred lines on, co-employment and, things that we should be doing ourselves versus outsourcing. But nonetheless, there are certain workflows where you need digital advertising experience or you need 6 months of training in order to do things really well. And that's one of the number one value propositions for impact sourcing is retention is so high, engagement is so high, attrition is very low, and there are definitely big opportunities to merge those two things together. Again, that comes with a lot of bias busting that needs to happen through that process because a lot of legacy teams might think there's no way that someone that didn't go to this college, that didn't work for this agency, that hasn't had this X amount of years of experience can do this work. And I'd say in most cases that's usually a bias that can be overcome, but it's still kind of directs where we're focusing our efforts, starting with the type of operations that are require less training, can more easily be transitioned from an existing provider. Customer support and quality is the most important thing for everything that we do at Google. Certainly when we were in high growth mode, blank checks across the board when it comes to outsourcing. No one thought or cared about money because we were growing so quickly that we needed these operations set up as fast as possible, and we were willing to kind of invest in that. As we become more mature and our operations are kind of getting to that next level, where we've got more stability and more knowledge about our own products even, those are priorities are shifting a little bit, but still, getting that high performance quality output is still the number one priority, and that's a place where impact sourcing can really, fit in a big way.
Great. I think that's bang on. So before I move on to possibly have my last one, and that would be for you, Daniel, for audience out there, if you've got any questions, put into chat. I've got the one question already. I doubt if we'll be able to finish it on time. We'll try and see if with Daniel and Alex's permission, we can extend maybe by a couple of more minutes, but we'll certainly come to that. For sure. So please drop in your questions in the chat box. You talked about two very interesting things, Alex, and I would just want to conclude that and then move on to Daniel for the last one. Attrition, absolutely. In fact, today we were having our weekly business review with our team, and the teams were fighting that whether a 5% or a 4% attrition is good or no attrition is good, or we keep talking about some programs having no attrition at all, right? So I think that's something which is a very, very strong point that impact sourcing brings on board. And when certain programs that you talk about wherein knowledge becomes very important, tenure is the most important aspect there. And I think that's a unparalleled advantage that impact sourcing can bring when, you go out to people who are in need, you create a sustainable opportunity for them, and then there is no looking back. Absolutely. One more point on scale, I think. That's something which is obviously there always with bigger player, but you talked about partnerships. I think a lot can be achieved with partnerships, and it's really great to see that focus coming in from your side. Shifting a bit towards the diversity side, which is your core, Daniel. Uh, According to you, outsourcing is what basically we are talking about here. Whether it is outsourcing or insourcing, what do you think? How important is diversity in various facets of business, and what, according to you, businesses can get benefited with if a diverse workplace has to be looked at, or diversity and inclusion has to be kind of considered as one of the most important factor for becoming a more conducive workplace. What's been your experience and challenges around law, people, culture that you have come across, because I see that you have done tremendous amount of work in this space.
Woo! How much time do we have? That's a great question. I'll take a stab at it, but let me know if I can follow up on any piece of it. So, I mean, there's a plethora of research out there about the benefits of diversity to a buying company, right? There's, particularly when you're talking about outsourcing, there's cost savings. Impact sourcing, what they always tell us, there's like 30% cost savings. It helps satisfy expectations of corporate responsibility, which has been heightened in the past couple of years, of course. Google, we're constantly talking about accessing the next billion users out there that currently aren't plugged into the internet community and able to access Google services the way the rest of the world is. And so when you're talking about like accessing to long tail languages, a lot of localization work is done through impact sourcing. And so, that's important by investing in the circular economy. When you're talking, that helps also access the next billion users. And then also, Alex made a good point about wanting to consolidate suppliers in a way. And then I've also heard kind of counterpoints as well to that about like diversifying our supply chain. So probably a double-edged sword there. But to be honest, like I'm not really concerned with that. I don't go to bed worried about how much money Google is missing out on by not doing impact sourcing work, right? Like I'm thinking like, aren't there bigger questions in the world out there, right? Like, I think the important question to think about is like, there's a leadership vacuum. There's a real leadership vacuum out in this world when it comes to poverty and employment. I know, at least in the United States, I know this is probably a better situation in like socialist countries, but in the United States, we have an abysmal policy solution when it comes to poverty and unemployment. Our solution is take out a bunch of loans, go to college, and then maybe not, you'll get a job that will return on investment and you'll be able to provide for yourself. Maybe not. That's really it so far. And that's not going to work for everybody. And we're painfully seeing that. And I think that's a lot of angst that's coming from my generation now. And we certainly haven't seen it work out in a lot of places that impact sourcing takes place now, places India, sub-Saharan Africa, oceanic islands. And I think we're also talking about like, we're ignoring that this really poverty largely occurs on racial lines, right? And that's why I'm so passionate about this, is because work is so essential to dignity and a better life in ways that I think we've seen like since the Marshall Plan rolled out, like what, in the 50s and 60s, that there's temporary stopgaps to that education and charity and foreign aid can provide, but work is the most sustainable form of anti-poverty solutioning that we have out there. And so global companies like Google that are able to permeate every facet of society, right, that are able to make so much money off of our data and accessing, being able to craft all these solutions that are really useful to us. Like, they also need to play a role in addressing these problems, because we can't leave it to the public sector and the NGOs of the world that just don't have the resources to compete on that. And I think anything less than that reciprocal investment in society is honestly extractive. And maybe that's like my advocacy hat talking. But I think that, like, if we really want to walk the talk around operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's to invest in the people. And those are the people that make our company and our work possible. And so, of course, we need to be able to, present this to our leadership and have them, approve this work, and that, and have it make business sense. But in the grand scheme of things, I always struggle with being presented like the business case as like the top line item, when I think that this is really thinking about like the people case for this work, and that people all over the world deserve opportunity. And it's, if they were just born in a formerly colonized land that was extracted for centuries and didn't have a chance to have access to opportunities that others did, that's what keeps me motivated in this work. And I think is a message that Google and other big corporations with economic footprints really need to be spreading out there, and maybe make this work a little sexier, to be honest, right? Because like procurement and impact sourcing isn't going to get everybody up at 8 a.m. or however early other folks are up on this work. I think translating like how you buy matters and can actually have life-changing effects on people around the world. That's what's important. And I know, like, when I'm calling up customer service now for, returning my Banana Republic order or something, and I hear someone's voice that an accent that I don't recognize, like, it makes me think differently now about like what kind of work opportunities does this have. So I'll end it there. I hope that we have tons of time for questions.
No, I think it's very insightful, Daniel, and pretty much conclusive in terms of looking at the bigger things or bigger picture at this point of time, looking beyond what kind of leadership vacuum that has been created, and what more can we do with what we have got. I think that's really amazing. We can actually, I feel like, we can continue and talk for hours and hours, but in the best interest of time, we'll have to kind of, put a pressure here. So I'll just take a couple of questions here. Rita asked that, while you talk largely about impact sourcing, providers or bigger players that you work with, they don't come and talk openly about, the word impact sourcing. They talk about, working with the community. They talk about corporate social responsibility, but they don't talk about impact sourcing per se. Do you see any particular reason around it, or what are you doing to make sure that, they also feel, proud about doing some phenomenal work and impacting communities out there?
Well, I think a lot of the reasons are because it's new and because it represents a different business model. Big corporations are hesitant to put labels and make commitments on things that they don't fully understand, which is, understandable. I don't know why the big providers haven't embraced this more, because it's an incredible marketing opportunity. It's an incredible way to get new business and make your clients happy. But I do think that there are some business and operational roadblocks to fully embracing something like this. Impact sourcing can be somewhat subjective in terms of what does it mean, how is it done, and that I think is difficult, from a 5,000 foot corporate view of, we're going to invest in this and promote it and change our culture and change our practices to do it. They really want to know damn well that this is going to work and that it's going to be sustainable and that they're going to be successful in that. So I think that that's one reason why you haven't seen so big of a rush, within the industry. It's also a big change in business model for, let's call them the pure BPO back office type providers. a lot of whom rely on attrition to keep costs low when they're doing a lot of work that's very transactional. You know, right now is an anomaly because everyone is desperate to hire, and everyone, you know, there's a lot of opportunities for you know, people in the outsourcing industry to move around and get higher wages. But under normal circumstances, most big providers count on a certain level of high attrition to keep their costs low. And so again, that's probably not the main blocker to this. At the end of the day, you know, even big companies can figure out how to provide good support and sell services to their customers with high levels of retention. But, you know, I think that it's mainly just about really not understanding what impact sourcing is and what they need to do in order to do that successfully. And that's hopefully going to come with time, you know, and pressure. And it's one of the reasons why, again, I can't let this go, because, you know, coming from the outsourcing industry and, you know, as an advisor working with so many providers, I know that that is where the main opportunity lies. If that can catch fire at a couple big companies, and be sustainable and become a core part of their business practices, we're good to go. You know, get 5% of the BPO industry in APAC to do impact sourcing. It's a big ass number, man. You know, there'd be a lot of people that are being lifted up all over the place. And it's no different than, you know, what we're doing now. It's just, you know, a little bit of kind of a familiarity curve that hopefully we're starting to see the tip of in the next year or so.
Awesome.
Yeah, I saw
Danielle,
this.
yeah.
I'll just add quickly. I ran into this a lot in my advocacy days around workforce and supplier diversity. I think putting a label on anything creates expectations, and being held to fulfilling expectations can be scary, because you can let people down if you have a bully pulpit to hold you accountable to something that's just more pressures on something. And I think, you know, also to Alex's point, this is, you know, as I'm understanding it, a relatively new field emerging over the past 10 some years of impact sourcing. And so, you know, I don't even think supplier diversity, which has been around since the 70s in the United States, has been as widespread as it could be in the United States, at least, or in the West. So I think in between not wanting to put the proverbial target on their backs, figuring things out, and then also having staff around that. I mean, Google is a huge company, and there's just a handful of us being staffed on impact sourcing. I can understand it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't need to happen. And it's through forums like this and the platform that FiveS is providing that more people are going to be able to learn about this and start forming expectations that this needs to be part of responsibility, procurement responsibility programs.
Awesome. I think we, as I said, you know, we can continue, but we'll have to actually put stopper here now, because it's been almost 1 hour. Some great takeaways from this conversation. One last point in 3 words, Alex, 3 hot areas of outsourcing coming out from Google.
You know, permanent work from home, remote operations is something that we're very interested in. Not quite ready to commit, but it's going to be, you know, a big part of how we outsource in the next couple of years. I guess, you know, optimizing and maturing operations. You know, like I mentioned earlier, we threw a lot of tomatoes at the wall when we were in hyper growth mode, and it's now time to cultivate that into, you know, more mature, stable, and efficient, you know, operations. So that's another focus area. And, you know, diversity and inclusion when it comes to our supplier, our portfolio, and ensuring, you know, not just from a DEI perspective, but from a general support perspective, that our providers are treating people fairly. You know, if you've got someone that's working on the Google account, we want to make sure they're paid fairly. We want to make sure that they have the right accommodations that they need. and that bleeds into impact sourcing in a big way. So, those are three big areas I think that will, be putting a lot of time and effort into over the next couple of years.
Awesome. Great. Daniel, I think this is pretty, I think, complete and holistic in itself, right? Uh, Great. Thank you so very much, both of you, Alex and Daniel, for coming over and talking about, one of the most important aspects, still underrated with regard to awareness in this part of the world, otherwise as well. And that's something that, we at FiveS, through our impact sourcing model, we have been looking at, scaling. I look forward to many more chats with you. We'll, write to you and we'll have some more chats around this very interesting topic, and how organizations like FiveS, B2R can actually, work with Google towards the bigger goal, and, make this world a better place to live for everyone around every corner that people live in.
Plus
Thank
one
you
to
so
that.
much.
Thank you so very much. Thanks, audience, for joining us. And looking forward to have you again on next coffee chat next month. Thank you so much. Wish you a very happy New Year and Merry Christmas, all of you. Take care.
Likewise. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.